My name is Bryce Langston, and if there's a phrase that defines my role in the world, it's just enough. Just enough to be reliable. Just enough to be invited. Just enough to be forgotten. At 35, I've perfected the art of existing in the margins, quiet, consistent, and largely invisible. My job as a regional safety inspector for logistics firms fits that theme perfectly. I come in, audit the systems, fix the broken links, and leave without much more than a nod. No one throws parties for the safety guy. No one remembers the man who prevented disaster instead of causing one. I used to think that was fine. Then I married Kendall Hartley. The Hartleys are the kind of family you see in magazine spreads about legacy and lawn care. Country club smiles, group photos with monogram sweaters, family crests etched into Christmas cards. I wasn't raised in that world. I came from a working-class family that showed love with hands that built, lifted, repaired. And I brought that with me. When I married Kendall, I thought showing up, doing the work, and supporting her people was the way in. Maybe not into their hearts, but at least into their respect. For the last 6 years, I've been the invisible scaffolding of Kendall's family gatherings. I repaired their air conditioners in July heat. I fixed their flickering Christmas lights without needing to be asked. I hauled her sister Riley's oversized couch up 2 flights of stairs when her boyfriend flaked. I even quietly floated the cost of a surprise baby shower when Kendall's older sister Cassidy fell short on planning funds. I never mentioned it. I never asked for anything back. I figured decency had its own reward, even if it wasn't wrapped in applause. But there's something haunting about always being helpful and never being seen. I noticed it in the way Riley's laugh changed when I walked into her room. The way Kendall's mom, Eleanor, only called me when she needed something heavy moved or something technical explained. The way her dad, Howard, Mr. Hartley, would say things like, "You're not one of us, Bryce, but you're trying." I always took that as a compliment. Now I realize it wasn't. Then came the night of Mr. Hartley's retirement party. It was held at the Ridgeview Country Club, a place with granite bar tops and soft jazz that made you forget your age. I arrived early to help string lights along the railings and check that the projector was working for the slideshow Kendall's cousin had pieced together. I had even stopped at the wine distributor to pick up 2 extra cases that Kendall forgot to reorder. No one thanked me, not that I expected it. As the guests trickled in, I watched the way the family worked the room, Riley in a gold dress laughing with someone from her law firm, Cassidy showing off baby photos to a cluster of admiring friends. Kendall looked radiant, to be fair. She always knew how to dress for a statement. And me? I stood by the drink table, nodding politely, answering the occasional question about lighting or setup. I delivered a short, heartfelt toast midway through the night. Nothing flashy. Just a few lines about how Howard had built more than a career. He built a legacy. It got the right amount of claps. Kendall leaned over and said, "That was sweet," before drifting off into another conversation that didn't include me. But what stayed with me, what anchored itself into my spine, was the seating chart. A laminated board by the main entrance, arranged like a wedding banquet. Rows of names under neat table numbers. I scanned it twice. My name wasn't there. I stood there for a moment too long, staring like it might magically appear. Then Riley's voice cut through the air behind me, something about Kendall's charity case. I turned around just in time to see her smirk fade when our eyes met. She didn't even flinch. Just kept laughing with her wine glass tilted like royalty. I walked outside for air. The cold nipped at my collar, but it wasn't the weather that made me feel frozen. It was the realization that I didn't have a seat, not just at the table, but in the family. I was a placeholder. A +1 with a credit card. Someone they tolerated because it was convenient. All that effort, all those weekends, all that silence I filled with service, meant nothing. I didn't yell, didn't storm out. I waited until the night ended. I helped clean up, loaded Kendall's trunk with leftover supplies, and drove home in silence while she scrolled through pictures and laughed at inside jokes I'd never be part of. That night, lying in bed next to the woman I married, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, maybe they don't see you because you were never meant to be seen. But I saw them. All of them. And that was the beginning of everything changing. It was a warm evening, the kind where the sky holds on to daylight just a bit longer, reluctant to let go. We were still at the retirement party, and I was doing what I always did, hovering in the background, helping keep things running without drawing attention to myself. The lights were up, the drinks were flowing, and the air buzzed with polite laughter and polished conversation. I'd just finished giving a brief toast, nothing elaborate, just a few words to honor Mr. Hartley, who had, for all his faults, built a life his family was proud to inherit. When I sat down, Kendall leaned over and offered a quick, "That was sweet," before floating away again to mingle with someone from her father's old firm. I stayed near the back patio, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, watching the people I'd spent years trying to win over. For a moment, I felt content. I'd done my part. I'd showed up, as always. Then came the conversation about the family barbecue the next day. A tradition. A big one. It was all they could talk about. The menu, the guest list, the setup, the new theme they were trying this year. I waited for the part where Kendall would loop me in, assign me a task, mention our arrival time, ask me to help with chairs like she usually did. But she didn't. Still trying to be useful, I stepped into the conversation and said, "I'll bring the dessert tomorrow. Got that bakery you all liked last Easter. They've got that peach cobbler again." Kendall paused. I remember that pause. It was subtle, but not silent. She looked down at her wine, swirled it like she was thinking, then looked back up with this glint in her eyes. And then she laughed. Not a big belly laugh. Just a short, dismissive chuckle, like a sound effect used to soften a blow. "Oh, you weren't invited," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. I blinked. "What?" She smiled, like it was all perfectly reasonable. "It's kind of a close family thing." Riley, who had been scrolling through her phone next to her, snorted and turned the screen toward me. There it was, digital evidence. A full seating chart. Programs printed in gold script. A note for the MC. Even a slide for the opening prayer. My name wasn't on anything. "It's just easier this way," Kendall said, shrugging. "You know how my mom is. She wanted it clean." She said clean, like I was a stain they didn't know how to scrub out. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know what I expected to see, maybe a flicker of guilt, some embarrassment, even a bit of hesitation. But there was nothing. Just that same easy calm she always wore around her family, like a different version of herself entirely. A curated Kendall. A Hartley Kendall. I smiled. Just a twitch. Just enough to not cause a scene. I didn't argue. I didn't press. I just nodded once, took one final sip from my glass, and placed it down on the tray of empty flutes beside me. I stood up slowly, dusted off the front of my slacks, and walked toward the exit. Nobody followed me. Nobody called out. I could hear the conversation behind me resume without missing a beat. More talk about side dishes, long games, who was bringing what. Like I'd never been there at all. I got into my car and sat still for a long time. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just hollow. And that hollow quickly filled with clarity. They'd made a choice. They always had. I just hadn't seen it. I was never one of them. I was a utility. A silent donor of time, money, and labor. I was what you used when you needed help moving boxes or footing a bill. But I was never going to be at their table. Not really. Not the way they talked about each other. Not the way they remembered each other in stories. Not the way they looked at each other and laughed. But the thing they forgot, the thing they all overlooked in their perfect little planning frenzy, was that I was the one who booked the venue. Not Kendall. Not her mom. Not Howard. Me. Bryce Langston. The invisible man with the bank account and the organizational skills. I pulled out my phone and opened the email confirmation. There it was. The Hartley Family Barbecue. Reserved in my name. Paid for by my card. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the options menu. I didn't act out of spite. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter, something cleaner. A correction. I hit Edit Reservation, scrolled to the bottom, and clicked Cancel. The catering deposit? Gone. Sound equipment? Canceled too. Even the bounce house Riley insisted on for her nieces and nephews, deleted. I sat there and watched the digital confirmations roll in, each one like a small breath of fresh air. Then I turned off the screen, leaned back in my seat, and let myself laugh. Just once. Just enough. It felt good. I slept like a rock that night. Not out of spite, not because I was proud of what I'd done, but because for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt something close to peace. Real, full-bodied stillness. No internal monologue reminding me of what I didn't say, what I didn't do, what I should have tolerated. Just quiet. I didn't even hear Kendall come in. She slipped into bed hours later, probably thinking I was too embarrassed or too sensitive to speak. But I wasn't either of those things anymore. I was awake. Morning sunlight poured in through the curtains, filtered and soft, the kind that usually inspired lazy weekends and shared breakfasts. But there was no sound of bacon in the pan. No orange juice being poured. Just silence, and the scent of strong coffee brewing in the kitchen, made by me, as always. I sat at the counter with my mug, phone beside me, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At 11:31 a.m., the first message came in. Kindle, Bryce. What did you do? Not good morning. Not, are you okay? Just confusion and blame, neatly wrapped in 6 words. I didn't reply. I just took a sip and refreshed the page. 5 minutes later, the second text rolled in, this time from Eleanor, Kindle's mother. Eleanor Hartley. Bryce, we are at the park and everything is gone? That one made me chuckle. Not because I was cruel, but because it was so surreal, so utterly on brand. No one called. No one thought maybe to check in on me the night before. But the moment their party plans unraveled, I was suddenly relevant again. Suddenly visible. I refreshed my messages again. More were rolling in now. Riley sent 3 a rapid fire. No greetings. No punctuation. Riley, did you seriously cancel the caterers? Riley, you're being childish. Riley, you're ruining everything. I didn't even open them all. I let them pile up, one after the other, like fallen dominoes. Kindle tried calling once. Then again. I let it ring. When the third call came, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and turned on the TV. Some mindless home renovation show. A guy with a nail gun and a too-wide smile talking about open-concept kitchens. I wasn't angry. That was the strangest part. There was no adrenaline. No guilt. I wasn't interested in revenge. What I did was a retraction. I took my name, my money, and my energy off the table. I finally matched their actions with my own. It wasn't even about the barbecue. Not really. It was about what it represented. All those years I stood by them, hands full of tools, arms sore from lifting furniture, wallet lighter from things they never reimbursed. I wasn't family. I was a resource. A tool they dusted off when it was convenient and shoved back into the drawer when they were done. They just didn't expect the tool to have a switch. At around noon, Kindle finally came home. I heard the door open, the shuffle of her heels across the hardwood, the small gasp when she saw me calmly sipping coffee in the kitchen like nothing had happened. She didn't start with a question. She started with accusation. You humiliated us, she snapped, tossing her purse onto the couch with more force than necessary. I didn't look up from my cup. I wasn't invited. She let out a sharp breath, like I was being unreasonable. That's not how family handles things. Good thing I'm not family then, I said quietly but clearly. That stopped her. She stood there, blinking, as if I had spoken a language she didn't understand. She walked to the kitchen island, leaned both hands on the edge, and stared at me. You made a scene. No, I replied. I removed myself from yours. Her mouth opened, then closed. Like she wanted to fight, but couldn't find the words. Like she wanted to twist it back into my fault, but didn't know where to start. I stood up, rinsed my mug in the sink, and wiped it dry with the towel she always left crumpled on the counter. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I was calm in a way that made her nervous. She tried again. Do you have any idea how that made us look? You mean the people who excluded their son-in-law from a family event and used his money to do it? I tilted my head slightly. Yeah, I think I have a pretty good idea. Her voice got lower then, more controlled. You made your point. I turned to face her fully. No, I made my boundary. That was the moment it clicked. I saw it in her eyes. The realization that something in me had shifted. That the version of Bryce who used to swallow everything and smile through it was gone. And in his place was someone she didn't know how to handle. Later that day, when I checked my phone again, the tone had shifted. A few of the messages stopped being angry and started being confused. Some were attempts to backtrack. Riley sent a passive-aggressive could have just talked to us. Eleanor left a dramatic voice memo about how she was deeply disappointed in my lack of maturity. I didn't respond. Not one word. Instead, I screenshotted the payment receipt, the one with my name, date, and confirmation number, and sent it to the family group chat. Just that. No caption. No snark. And then I muted the thread. I went back to the couch, turned the volume down low, let the fake smile on the TV host blend into the background as I leaned my head back and listened to the sound of peace. Kindle came home like a storm that forgot it was forecasted. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the hallway mirror. I didn't flinch. I was sitting at the dining table, scrolling idly through a parts catalog for work, half listening to some slow jazz playing on my phone. She kicked off her heels, loudly, deliberately, and stood in the middle of the living room like she was deciding whether to start yelling or burst into tears. You humiliated us, she said, voice tight, but not yet screaming. I looked up and took a sip of water. I wasn't invited. Her jaw tensed, and her fingers curled into the edge of her purse like she was squeezing a stress ball. That's not how family handles things. Good thing I'm not family then, I replied. Same tone, same volume. That line landed like a slap. She blinked twice, like her brain was buffering. There it was. That pause. That split second where her face cracked and tried to rearrange itself into something resembling indignation, but it didn't quite make it. Bryce, she started, pacing now, arms flailing a little. You canceled the entire thing. Do you know how many people had RSVP'd? We had speeches, music, lawn games. The kids were looking forward to that bounce house. Do you think this was just about you? I leaned back in the chair, folded my arms across my chest, and said nothing. Because honestly, I was past the part where I needed to convince anyone of anything. It was supposed to be fun, she continued, voice rising. You made it personal. No, I said calmly, you made it personal when you looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't invited. You didn't whisper it. You didn't pull me aside. You said it casually, like I was some neighbor asking to borrow a lawn chair. Kendall rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake. Riley said it would be easier. Less awkward. We just didn't want tension. You always make things tense around my family. I narrowed my eyes slightly. Do I make things tense? Or do I just remind them that there are consequences to treating people like they're invisible? She stared at me, lips parted like she was about to respond. But she didn't. Because she knew what I said wasn't wrong. What frustrated her wasn't that I canceled the party, it was that I finally acted in a way she couldn't preempt, couldn't soften with charm, couldn't control. Her phone buzzed on. The counter. Then again. Then again. She picked it up and grimaced. Probably Riley blowing up her messages or her mother calling for the 5th time today to deliver another melodramatic lecture. She silenced it and looked back at me with a gaze that was now part desperation, part confusion. I just don't understand, she muttered. Why now? Why this? I stood and walked slowly toward the kitchen, grabbed the envelope I had pulled from the drawer earlier that morning, and handed it to her. She looked at it, confused, then opened it. Inside was a printed copy of the reservation confirmation for the barbecue venue. My name at the top, my credit card listed, the deposit breakdown, the cancellation confirmation underneath it all in bold. Her face turned pale. Not because she didn't know, but because seeing it on paper made it real. You were okay taking my money, I said softly, but not my presence. She sat down at the edge of the couch, suddenly quiet. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked like a little girl who had just been caught sneaking out. Except she wasn't a kid. She was a grown woman who had let her family dictate the limits of our relationship and quietly agreed to exclude me from something I paid for. Later that evening, her sister Riley tried to FaceTime me. I declined it without hesitation, then declined the second attempt. When the third one came, I blocked the number for the night. I had nothing left to explain. Eleanor left me a voice memo, 3 minutes of righteous indignation. She called me petty, immature, and clearly not ready for the gravity of family obligation. I played it once, then deleted it. She said I should be ashamed, but I wasn't. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt proud of myself. I sent her a single message in response, a screenshot of the receipt and nothing else. 10 minutes later, I saw that she read it. That was the last I heard from her that day. But what caught me off guard was the message that came a few hours after sunset. Tanner, Kendall's older brother. The one sibling who always seemed distant but not cruel. The one who rarely chimed in at family dinners and never ganged up with the others when I was the punchline. His message read, Honestly, I don't blame you. That was messed up. You deserve better. That hit differently. It wasn't an apology on behalf of anyone. It wasn't even an offer to fix things. It was acknowledgement. And that meant more than any invitation could have. I typed out a response, paused, then deleted it. Instead, I just liked the message. That was enough. The rest of the night was quiet. Kendall retreated to the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, lights dim, the sound of the ceiling fan humming in rhythm with my thoughts. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. Some fires don't need a spark. They start in silence, in slow dismissals, in subtle exclusions. And sometimes, the only way to put them out is to walk away from the smoke. The silence settled into the house like dust, soft, steady, and impossible to ignore. Kendall didn't speak to me for 2 days. Not one word. No yelling. No apologies. No quiet attempts to mend what she knew was broken. She moved through the house like a ghost with unfinished business, slamming drawers, shutting doors too hard, thudding her heels across the floor with unnecessary force. Each sound was a performance, not of anger, but of injured pride. She didn't want to fix what happened. She wanted to punish me for not letting it go. But I didn't flinch. Not once. I woke up early, made my coffee, sat at the kitchen island, answered work emails, took a few conference calls, and watched her come and go like she was auditioning for the role of betrayed wife. The truth, though? I wasn't angry anymore. Just aware. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her to acknowledge me. I was watching her show me who she really was. By day 3, the family launched into damage control. Kendall's mom, Eleanor, posted a smiling group photo from the barbecue that wasn't, captioned with something like, "Sometimes, the best memories come from the most unexpected moments. Hartleys always make it work." It was a desperate attempt to control the narrative. The photo was awkward, too posed, and Mr. Hartley looked visibly confused, probably wondering why they were posing in front of an empty pavilion with no guests and half-set tables. Kendall untagged me in the few photos that had my name attached, like I was a phase she was trying to erase. Riley, unsurprisingly, went full scorched earth. She unfollowed me across every social media platform, sent a few indirect tweets about energy vampires and grown men who act like children. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the apps for the rest of the day, because the thing was, I wasn't trying to win anything anymore. I had nothing to prove. I'd spent years making myself small enough to fit inside their version of family. This was the first time I had reclaimed space for myself, and the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was restorative. That's when I realized something important. Kendall wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry I reacted in a way she couldn't control. She wasn't mourning a rupture in trust. She was grieving the loss of my compliance. That shook her more than anything. My silence wasn't passive. It was active resistance. The more I kept quiet, the more frantic they became. Riley sent a long text for thick paragraphs full of sarcasm disguised as concern. "I just don't understand how you could throw away everything over a little misunderstanding. You know how mom gets. You should have handled this like an adult." I read it once, laughed softly, then archived it without replying. It wasn't worth the energy. Kendall began to circle. She'd hover in the same room with me, folding laundry she normally left untouched, wiping down clean counters, asking passive questions about things she already knew. "Did you see the mail today? Did your car key fob need new batteries?" I answered only what was necessary, short, polite, detached. The more neutral I became, the more agitated she got. She wanted me to snap. She wanted to blow up. Something to justify her outrage. But I wouldn't give her that. I'd already given too much. By that Friday, the silence wasn't just between us, it was surrounding her family, too. No one from the Hartleys had reached out again, not even Mr. Hartley. Maybe they realized I wasn't budging. Maybe they were still trying to spin the story into something that made sense to them. Either way, I didn't care. I had my peace. And then the strange part happened. I started to like it. The quiet. The freedom. I went to bed without the weight of trying to decode Kendall's moods. I ate dinner without being interrupted by snide comments about my basic tastes or her family's endless string of humble brags. I sat on the balcony at night and actually tasted my coffee, really tasted it, for the first time in a long time. I didn't miss them. I didn't miss her. One night, while scrolling through old photos out of idle curiosity, I found an image from our first anniversary. We were at a small cabin in the mountains, snow in the background, fire crackling beside us, Kendall in a red sweater laughing into a cup of cider. I remember taking that photo. I remember thinking, I finally found someone who sees me. Looking at it now, I realized something else. I wasn't in the photo. I was always behind the camera, always watching her shine, always holding the frame, but never inside it. It was a small thing, but it broke something loose inside me, a truth I hadn't wanted to admit. Maybe she never really saw me at all, and maybe I'd finally stopped trying to make her. By Saturday morning, the silence had transformed from a standoff into a sanctuary. I brewed coffee, took a long shower, then pulled out my laptop and started researching short-term apartments nearby. Not because I was making a decision just yet, but because I wanted to see what life could look like, without the noise, the constant effort, the performance. Nothing makes people panic like the sound of your peace. And I was beginning to fall in love with mine. Tanner texted me on a Wednesday. "You free this Friday? I'll grill." No drama. It was the kind of message you don't expect from a brother-in-law who spent most of your marriage sitting at the edge of conversations, nodding politely but saying little. Tanner wasn't like the rest of them, not fully. He kept his distance from the chaos, a silent observer rather than an enabler. I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering, unsure what this was. A trap? A peace offering? A misstep? I typed back, sure. What time? Friday evening came with a light breeze and the kind of sky that looked like it had been painted in layers, soft orange, a hint of purple at the edges. I pulled up to Tanner's modest house on the edge of the neighborhood, nothing showy, no trimmed hedges or glowing porch lanterns. Just a driveway, 2 folding chairs in the yard, and the smell of meat already sizzling on the grill. Mira opened the door before I could knock. "Hey, Bryce," she said with a warm smile. "Come on in. Shoes off, please." June's in her no-shoe phase. Their daughter, June, 7 and small for her age, peeked around the corner with a remote control in one hand and a battered little race car in the other. "It's broken," she announced, as if it was the most urgent news of the evening. I crouched down. "Let me take a look." She handed it over like she was giving me sacred treasure. I sat on the floor with her for 10 minutes, unscrewing the battery casing, rewiring a loose connector, showing her how the antenna needed to be upright. She watched closely, eyes wide, like I was some kind of magician. "You fixed it," she shouted, racing it in uneven circles around the kitchen tile. Tanner chuckled from the backyard as I stepped outside. "Guess you still got the magic touch," he said, handing me a cold beer. "Thanks for coming, man." Mira was a little nervous you'd say no. I shrugged, taking a sip. Didn't see a reason to. We settled into a rhythm, just the 4 of us. No tension, no side eyes, no careful dodging of verbal landmines. Mira played music from her phone, some acoustic playlist with just enough bass to tap your foot to, and June flitted between us with her car, offering updates like a pint-sized race commentator. Dinner was simple: grilled chicken, corn on the cob, some kind of garlic bread Mira had baked herself. I didn't realize how much I missed food made without the pressure of perfection. No platters arranged by color, no table settings dictated by Pinterest boards. Just warm food, warm people, and space to breathe. Mira passed me another drink halfway through the meal and said, "Tanner said you're the only one in that family with a spine." I nearly laughed. "That can't be true. I'm the guy who used to fix their gutters in the rain." "Yeah, but you're also the guy who finally stopped letting them walk all over him," she said. "That counts." Tanner nodded beside her, chewing quietly, then said, "It's about time someone held up a mirror." I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the stars as they blinked into view one by one. I hadn't done that in a long time, just looked up. Felt the night stretch over me like a blanket that didn't need straightening. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't sad. I didn't miss Kindle. I didn't miss the noise, the image management, the endless performance of being a good husband to a woman who graded me silently on a scale I never understood. I didn't miss her family. I didn't miss pretending. After dinner, we sat around a small fire pit in their yard. June had gone to bed, and Mira excused herself to start cleaning up. Tanner and I sat in comfortable silence until he spoke again. "They don't know how to deal with someone who doesn't beg for approval," he said. I looked over. "You mean me?" "I mean you now. The old you?" "Maybe. But the guy who canceled the whole event because he got disrespected? That guy scares them." I chuckled. "Good." Tanner leaned forward, poking the fire with a stick. "I think they forgot you were a person. You just became part of the furniture. The guy who brings the toolbox. The guy who shows up." I nodded. "And disappears when they're done with him." He turned to me, voice quiet. "I see you, Bryce. For what it's worth." And that hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was real. On the drive home, I passed the Hartley house. Lights glowing on the porch. Cars lined up along the curb. Another dinner party, no doubt. Kendall's voice probably carried through the walls, perfectly rehearsed. Riley laughing like she owned the air. Eleanor probably sitting at the head of the table, orchestrating it all. I didn't slow down. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't feel bitter. Just free. It hit me then. Not every door left ajar needs to be walked through. Some are meant to stay closed. Some are meant to remind you that not all rooms are worth being in, even if the table looks pretty. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man shut out of a family. I felt like someone who finally walked out. Kindle cracked on a Tuesday morning. No warning. No build-up. Just silence over coffee until, suddenly, there wasn't. "Can we talk?" she asked, not quite looking at me, her hands wrapped tight around her mug like it might keep her grounded. I set my spoon down beside the oatmeal I hadn't touched. "Sure." She sat across from me, posture too straight, face composed but cracking at the corners. She looked like someone preparing for a deposition, not a conversation with her husband. That alone told me everything about where this was heading. I wanted to explain, she began, her tone soft, like I might break if she spoke too harshly. The whole barbecue thing. It was Riley's idea, not mine. She thought maybe you'd make it awkward with Mom after that thing last Thanksgiving. I raised an eyebrow. The thing where I refused to fix the sink while everyone else was eating dessert? Kendall shifted in her seat, eyes flicking to the side. It wasn't about that. It was just they thought it might be easier. Less tense. And you agreed. She hesitated. That half-second pause where guilt tries to make room for itself, but pride doesn't step aside. I didn't fight it. That landed with a dull thud between us. I waited, letting the silence stretch, watching her squirm. She hated quiet when it wasn't under her control. But I didn't mean for it to go like that, she added quickly. I didn't think you'd take it so personally. I leaned forward just slightly. That's the problem, Kendall. You didn't think about me at all. She blinked, clearly not expecting that tone from me. The old Bryce would have softened it, wrapped it in disclaimers and self-blame. But that man had left the room weeks ago. You didn't think about how it would feel to be left out. You didn't think about what it meant for me to find out like that. At a table I helped set up, holding a drink I paid for, standing next to people I thought I'd earned some kind of place with. I shook my head. You didn't think. You just let it happen. She rubbed her forehead, the guilt starting to fight its way through. I don't know what you want me to say, Bryce. I want you to tell me the truth, I said quietly. Did you think I didn't deserve to be there? Or did you just not care enough to make sure I was? Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But no answer came. Instead, she offered what she always did when cornered, a compromise without substance. I can fix it, she said. You can come to the next one. Dinner at Mom's. I'll make sure you're on the list. I stared at her, the weight of that sentence pinning me down. On the list. Like I was a contractor, not a husband. Like my presence was conditional, not assumed. Let me ask you something, I said slowly. If I show up next time, am I a guest? Or a ghost? She swallowed. Hard. I don't want to be tolerated, Kendall. I want to be chosen. Her expression flickered, the mask slipping for a brief moment. She looked down, then away, like she could outrun the truth in my words. But she couldn't. It was sitting in the room with us, bold and unashamed. I pushed my chair back and stood. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. I'm not asking to be treated like royalty, I continued. But I've spent years standing in corners, fixing things, paying for things, showing up without being seen. And if the best you can offer me now is a late invitation out of guilt, then you haven't heard a word I've said. Her voice came out smaller than I expected. So what? You're giving up? I shook my head. I already gave. And gave. And gave. What I'm doing now is walking away. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I just went into the guest room and closed the door behind me. She didn't follow. Not that night. Not the next morning. And maybe that was the clearest answer of all. That night, I lay on the spare bed, smaller, colder, but peaceful. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the moment at the barbecue party. The sound of her laugh when she told me I wasn't invited. The way her sisters smirked like I was some strange pet that wandered into the wrong room. That was the moment the thread snapped. There's a kind of sadness that settles in when you realize someone never really chose you, only the version of you that served their image, their convenience, their narrative. I had been that version for too long. No more. I reached for my phone and typed out a message to myself, something I'd been thinking but hadn't had the courage to say aloud. If they can laugh at your absence, they never deserved your presence. I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need the words saved. I already knew them by heart. I told her the truth the next morning. Not with yelling, not with dramatics, just with the calm precision that comes when you've already left a place in your mind long before your feet follow. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, clutching a coffee mug like it was armor. Her eyes were rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that didn't come from sleep deprivation but from the slow unraveling of control. For once, she wasn't dressed for the day. No lipstick, no blazer, just a faded college t-shirt and cotton shorts, like she knew whatever was coming didn't deserve a costume. I don't want to be tolerated, I said, stirring my coffee slowly. I want to be chosen. She leaned against the frame, brow furrowed like she didn't quite understand. So what? You're done? I didn't flinch. I already was. You just didn't notice. The silence that followed wasn't sad. It was still. Hollow. She didn't argue. Didn't beg. And that was what confirmed it for me. There was no fight because there was nothing left to fight for. I packed slowly. Not because I was unsure. but because I wanted to be deliberate. I took what was mine, my tools, my books, the shirts she never liked but I wore anyway. I left behind the expensive watch she got me for our 3rd anniversary. It had always felt more like a performance piece than a gift. I left the tie she bought to help you fit in at family functions, because now I knew that tie was never meant for me, it was for them. I didn't touch her things. I didn't write a long note. Just a short one, folded neatly and placed on the kitchen table under her favorite ceramic mug. You don't have to remember the people you used, but they remember you. Every time you laugh at them. That was all I had to say. Not out of bitterness, not out of spite, but because I knew she'd read it again and again trying to decide if I meant it as a threat, a warning, or a goodbye. It was all 3. The apartment I moved into was nothing fancy. A 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building that smelled like fresh paint and something faintly lemony. There was no view, no fireplace. But the lock worked, the water pressure was solid, and the silence didn't feel like punishment, it felt like a reset. I set up the essentials first, coffee maker, lamp, the mattress I'd bought online that somehow expanded in slow motion across the floor. There was no welcome home, no soft echo of familiar footsteps behind me. And yet, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I wasn't lying to myself anymore. That weekend, I went hiking alone. For the first time in years. I didn't take the trail Kindle always picked, the one with flat loops and manicured paths for easy selfies. I picked something rugged, steeper, noisy with birds and wind, and the kind of honest effort that left your calves aching. At the top, I sat on a crooked bench and let the sun hit my face. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about what they were doing. I didn't wonder if anyone noticed I was gone. Because I finally did. I noticed myself again. I realized that I hadn't really seen myself in years. Not as I was, just as a utility, a role, a husband shaped to fit someone else's design. I had bent so much to make Kindle comfortable, to make her family less awkward around me, that I'd folded myself into something almost unrecognizable. But now, I was sore from the hike. My hair was damp with sweat. My legs had scratches from a missed branch, but I felt human, present, whole. That night, I fell asleep to the hum of the ceiling fan, and not the cold edge of a woman who only remembered I existed when I was useful. No fake apologies. No one hurling silence like a weapon. Just stillness. Kindle texted once that evening. Just one line. So this is it? I read it. Then turned off my phone. No response was the answer. Some things don't deserve closure. Some things don't get a ribbon tied around them at the end. Sometimes, the cleanest goodbye is simply walking away without turning back. The next morning, I opened the blinds in my new place and stood barefoot on the hardwood floor. Light poured across the room, touching the bare walls and unassembled furniture like a spotlight on a blank stage. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like a beginning. I didn't go looking for updates about the Hartleys. But when you spend years orbiting around a particular sun, some of its rays still manage to reach you, even after you've stepped out of its warmth. It started with a coworker who had unknowingly followed Eleanor on Instagram. We were eating lunch in the break room when he said, "Didn't you used to be married into the Hartley family?" Man, their last event looked like a train wreck. I paused mid-bite. What event? He turned his phone around. A blurry photo of plastic folding chairs, mismatched tablecloths, and someone trying to light citronella candles with a broken lighter. Beneath the post, Eleanor had written a caption dripping in artificial cheer. Sometimes plans fall through, but love shows up anyway. Hartley family barbecue, take 2. There was no bounce house, no band, no carefully curated ambience. Just a dozen people in lawn chairs looking confused. I recognized the park, smaller than the original venue, one without a pavilion, just 2 overworked picnic tables and a patch of shade under a tired oak. Rumors began to swirl after that. Tanner told me first. He'd stopped by the apartment with some leftover pizza and a 6-pack, unannounced but welcome. We sat on the balcony, feet up on the railing, city sounds floating up from below. They rescheduled it without your money, he said, cracking open a can. No vendors, no equipment. They forgot to rent coolers. The food sat in the sun. One of the uncles got heat stroke. I raised an eyebrow. And the bounce house? Deflated halfway through. Some kid cried so hard his mom had to leave early. I didn't laugh. Not out of restraint, but because it wasn't funny. It was pathetic. Sad, even. Not because they failed, but because they still didn't understand why. They blamed it on you. You know, Tanner added after a pause. Not by name, but Riley said something about external drama in a video she posted. Tried to make it sound like you ruined everything. I turned to him. And what did the comments say? He smirked. Let's just say not everyone bought it. Couple of your old colleagues commented. One guy said, Bryce was always the one holding things together. The rest of the replies were not flattering. I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I exhaled slowly and took a sip of my drink. They miss your wallet, Tanner said after a beat. Not your presence. I nodded. That stung in a way I didn't want to admit. Because even though I was gone physically, emotionally, finally, a small part of me had hoped someone there would reach out not to mend, but to acknowledge. Not to pull me back in, but to say, you mattered. But what came instead were soft, muted pings of regret disguised as convenience. Cassidy messaged me on Facebook, something vague about reconnecting over coffee. Kendall's cousin sent a text I hadn't seen in over a year. Heard you've been doing well. We should catch up. Even Eleanor, in her own condescending tone, wrote, Despite everything, I hope you're finding peace. We may not have seen eye to eye, but I wish you well. None of it was real. They weren't sorry. They were circling back to see if I still had something left to offer. If the door had been left ajar. But I'd shut it quietly. Locked it. Moved down the street and planted a new one. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of vengeance. Just clarity. You don't owe people access to you simply because they finally noticed the space you used to fill. Tanner picked at the edge of his beer label. I told Mira if I ever started acting like Riley, she should smack me with a shoe. I chuckled. Just make sure it's one of those heavy-soled ones. He smiled. You know, some of them think you did this for attention. That you wanted to make a scene. I didn't want a scene, I said. I wanted respect. Yeah, he nodded. And you didn't get it. No. But I found peace. That's better. We finished our drinks in silence. City lights flickered on below like the world was slowly remembering itself. It didn't feel like I was rebuilding. It felt like I was unburdening. The next morning, I cleaned out the last of the moving boxes, tossing old receipts, expired warranties, bits of junk I'd clung to for no reason. I found an old Hartley family calendar, a thick cardstock printout from 3 Christmases ago. My name wasn't on it. Even then, I held it for a moment, then folded it twice and tossed it in the trash. That afternoon, I went for a walk downtown. The air was crisp, the sidewalks full of strangers with nothing to prove. I passed a coffee shop, paused, then walked inside. Sat by the window. Ordered something I hadn't tried before. Vanilla oat latte. I pulled out a book and started reading. And for the first time in years, I wasn't scanning the room for approval. I wasn't hoping to be seen. I was just there. Fully. Finally. 6 months later, my living room smelled like barbecue sauce, vanilla candles, and something unmistakably warm, something that didn't come from a thermostat or a stovetop. It came from laughter. From voices overlapping as stories were told and retold. From a room that wasn't filled with people who shared blood, but people who shared respect. I was hosting my first birthday dinner in years. Not a grand affair. No ballroom. No curated playlist reviewed by Kendall's sister. Just 7 people. My closest friend from work. My neighbor from downstairs who once helped me carry a broken shelf up 3 flights of stairs, a guy from the auto shop who'd become an unlikely confidant. And Tanner and Mira, of course. With June, who burst through the door holding a handmade card decorated in more glitter glue than paper. For you, she shouted. It has a dinosaur in a party hat. And it did. A crooked green T-Rex with sparkly teeth and a balloon tied to its tail. I bent down, taking it like it was priceless. This might be the best card I've ever gotten. She beamed and ran off to show someone her new toy. Mira leaned in and handed me a foil-covered pan. Mac and cheese. The real kind. With 3 cheeses and no judgment. The table wasn't set with matching plates. Some of the chairs didn't belong together. I had to borrow a few from the building manager, who said, You finally throwing a party, Langston, with a wink. I didn't call it a party. I just said I was having dinner with good people. I grilled ribs. Burned the first batch a little. No one cared. The drinks were cold. The music was an old soul playlist I liked. Tanner brought his famous grilled corn, and June insisted on setting the table fancy, which meant every napkin had a crayon drawing tucked under it. We sat. We ate. We laughed. And not once did I wonder if I belonged. Not once did I feel like a shadow at the edge of someone else's spotlight. At one point, Mira raised her glass and tapped it gently with her fork. The room quieted just enough. To Bryce, she said, smiling in that effortless way she had. To the man who knew when to walk away. And the courage it took to finally say, I deserve more. The table clinked with echoing cheers. My throat tightened, Not because I was sad, but because I was full. Full in a way I hadn't been in years. I looked around the table. No monogrammed napkins, no family crest carved into wood, no forced smiles. Just real ones. A guy from my building leaned in, wiping barbecue sauce off his chin. "Man, you know how to host." I laughed. "That's just code for, you didn't overthink it." He grinned. "Exactly." Later that night, when most of the dishes were done and June had fallen asleep with her head on Myra's lap, Tanner joined me on the small balcony. He handed me a beer and looked out into the quiet night. "You did it," he said. "Did what?" "Built something new." I let the words sink in. Not like a compliment, but like a confirmation. Something true, something earned. "I didn't know I needed to," I said, "until I left what I thought I had." "Yeah, well," he said, cracking open his bottle. "Sometimes the family you build makes more sense than the one you married into." We sat in silence, watching the streetlights flicker and cars roll by. I thought about the old days, dinners where I was dressed right, said all the right things, paid the bill, smiled through the condescension, and went home feeling emptier than when I arrived. I thought about Kendall's laugh when she told me I wasn't invited, the smirk on Riley's face, the way I stood there, invisible in plain sight. And now here I was, a second-floor apartment, folding chairs, glitter-glue dinosaurs, laughter spilling from a place that felt lived in, not performed. I wasn't trying to be part of their family anymore. I'd built one of my own, not out of defiance, not to prove a point, but because peace is the kind of thing that doesn't shout, it hums. It moves through spaces you didn't know needed filling, and it stays. When the last guest left and the apartment fell into the hush of post-celebration, I turned off the lights, sat at the table, and looked at the empty plates, the crumpled napkins, the sticky fingerprints on the side of a glass. Evidence, not of a party, but of presence. This time, I wasn't standing in the shadows. I was at the head of the table. My name is Miles Carter, and last month, I earned something I never thought I would, something that should have mattered. After 15 years at Briarwood Foundry, 12-hour shifts, busted knuckles, double pay on holidays, and not one damn complaint, I was promoted to operations supervisor. Not temporary, not acting, real title, real raise. It came with a gray laminated badge that didn't smell like sweat, a reserved parking spot near the east gate, and an office with walls that didn't rattle when the forge fired up. I should have felt proud. I should have felt seen. I came home late that night, a pizza box in one hand and the letter from corporate still warm from the printer in the other. Delia was curled up on the couch, legs folded beneath her, scrolling through her phone like the rest of the world didn't exist. Her glass of red wine was sweating on a coaster I built for her last Christmas. She didn't look up. "I got it," I said, standing there, trying not to grin like a damn schoolboy. "They made it official today, operations supervisor. Full benefits. 5-figure bump in pay." She blinked at me. Not even a full blink, just the slow kind, like maybe she didn't hear me or didn't want to. Then she offered a smile so faint it felt like a leftover. "That's great, honey." That was it. "No, I'm proud of you." No hug. Not even a toast with that wine she kept swirling like it had secrets in it. She just turned her eyes back to her phone, thumbs tapping out something more interesting than the man who'd been breaking his back for years to give her a better life. I stood there for a few more seconds, like maybe if I gave her time to process it, she'd say something else. But the silence stretched, tight and ugly, until the microwave beeped in the kitchen. I took my box of lukewarm pizza and went upstairs. Then came the dinner. Delia had organized it, said it was just a little something with her family to celebrate. I should have known better. Her brother Reese was there, grinning like always, sipping on that top-shelf bourbon he only brought out when he wanted to make sure everyone noticed how expensive it was. Her parents, Darlene and Ken, had driven down from Covington. Even her cousin Jasmine showed up in heels too high for a family table and a dress that looked like it cost more than our water heater. The food was good, I'll give them that. Delia made the baked mac the way I liked it, and her mother brought those damn deviled eggs I could never say no to. But all through dinner, the talk was about Trent. Delia's ex, Trent, just bought a new condo downtown, her dad said at one point, like he was proud of him. He's in management now too. Corporate level. I chewed my chicken and stayed quiet. We made it to dessert before it happened. Reese stood up, raised his glass, and grinned like a man who'd been waiting all night for his moment. "Here's to Miles," he said. Guess Briarwood needed a token idiot to fill the chair. Laughter. Real, full-throated laughter. Delia's laugh was the loudest. I looked at her. She didn't even glance back. I felt something inside me twist, something that had been coiled too tight for too long. I could feel the back of my neck flush, and I focused on the flickering candle in the center of the table just to stop myself from reacting. Just a joke, I told myself. Just Reese being Reese. Then Jasmine giggled and added, still think Delia peaked with Trent, though. And right then, as if God himself was playing a cruel trick, Darlene raised her glass and said, to Trent, the one that got away. Glasses clinked. Smiles. Even a slow clap from Reese. Delia? She didn't flinch. She toasted, drank, smiled. I didn't say a word. I pushed my chair back slow and quiet, stood up, and walked out. No slamming, no shouting. Just left. The Kentucky air outside bit at my skin, but I didn't notice. I got into my truck, hands trembling, heart heavy. The street lamps buzzed above me, and I sat there staring through the windshield, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was being sensitive, that maybe they didn't realize how it landed. But deep down, I knew better. Later that night, I got the text. Delia, from upstairs, while I was still in the garage pretending to organize my old tool shelf. Don't be dramatic. It was a joke. That was her response. Not sorry. Not they went too far. Not I should have said something. Just that. A joke. They laughed at me like I was some sad clown in a uniform that didn't fit. Laughed at my hard-earned promotion like it was a participation trophy. And the woman I married, the one I thought would always have my back, laughed right along with them. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the old couch in the den, staring at the dark ceiling, hearing the echo of their voices in my skull over and over. Guess Briarwood needed a token idiot. To Trent, the one that got away. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being dismissed, disrespected, erased. And in that quiet room, with only the ticking clock and my own breathing for company, I decided something I hadn't dared let myself consider before. Maybe the man they laughed at wasn't the punchline. Maybe he was just done. And maybe next time, I wouldn't just leave the table. I'd flip the whole damn thing. I didn't go to work the next morning. Didn't call in either. I just got in the truck before sunrise, hands shaking as I turned the key, and drove south. No real plan, just out. Out of that house. Out of that silence. Out of that marriage I wasn't sure I was even in anymore. The roads were still wet from last night's rain, mist hanging low over the asphalt like smoke. The headlights cut through it in a weak, almost reluctant beam, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd even packed my wallet. I didn't check. I didn't care. I must have driven for 4 hours before I realized where I was headed. Somerset. My uncle's old cabin sat near the lake, tucked behind a line of crooked trees and blackberry bushes. It had been years since I'd been there, but something about the gravel crunching under the tires and the side of that weather-stained porch made my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. My Uncle Harvey died 8 years ago, left the cabin to the family. My cousin Jaden was supposed to keep it up, and while we hadn't spoken in years, I knew he had too much guilt in his bones to let the place rot. Sure enough, the gutters were clear, the lock still stiff but working. I stepped inside and let the door shut behind me with a hollow thunk. It was dusty. The kind of dust that clings to forgotten places and things. But it wasn't dirty. A few spider webs in the corners, some scuff marks on the floor, but otherwise, the place looked like it had been waiting for someone. Waiting for me. I dropped my duffel bag on the old corduroy couch, kicked off my boots, and stood there in the quiet. No TV. No buzzing phone. No glances across the room that felt like accusations. Just silence. I grabbed a beer from the rusted mini fridge, lukewarm, stale, but I didn't care. Sat on the porch with my legs stretched out and the bottle sweating in my hand. The woods rustled around me, birds calling out like they hadn't seen another human in days. I leaned back in the old chair and stared out at the trees, the lake just beyond them glinting like a sheet of steel in the morning light. And that's when the question hit me. Not suddenly, not loud, but quiet, too quiet. When did I stop being a man? When did I stop being the person who was earned, not pitted? When did I go from the man who fixed everything with his hands to the man people laughed at over dinner like a broken tool in the junk drawer? Delia hadn't called. Not once. Not a single buzz or "Where are you?" or "Come home." The woman I married, who used to kiss my knuckles after long shifts, didn't seem to notice I was gone. Or worse, she noticed and didn't care. That silence, it said more than any argument ever could. It told me exactly where I stood. It told me I was furniture. Background. The guy who paid the bills and took the jokes. I thought about that night again, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the way Delia's smile curled at the edges when her family roasted me alive like it was just sport. And the worst part? I didn't defend myself. I let it happen. I let them carve into me like I didn't bleed. But out here, on this porch with no one watching, I felt something else stir beneath the hurt. A slow, quiet burn. The kind of heat that comes not from anger, but from recognition. Recognition that I had let this happen. I gave them the benefit of the doubt one too many times. Took the hits and told myself I was being patient, being mature, being a man. But real men don't sit at tables where they're not respected. Real men don't stay where they're only useful when quiet. The sun slid higher in the sky. I pulled out my phone finally. No missed calls. One text from my supervisor, Angelo. Everything okay? We good for the team meeting Monday? I stared at it for a while. My thumb hovered. Then I typed. Taking a few days. Personal. He responded 2 minutes later. Got it. Take care of yourself. At least someone noticed. I didn't text Delia. Didn't tell her where I was. I wanted to see how long it would take before she cared enough to ask. By nightfall, still nothing. I charged my phone in the kitchen using an old outlet that sparked when I plugged it in, then curled up on the couch under a scratchy wool blanket. I didn't sleep well. The quiet was loud, and every creak in the floorboards felt like a memory I hadn't asked to remember. The next morning, I shaved. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself I still had a face worth seeing. The mirror over the bathroom sink was cracked at the corner, but the man staring back looked clearer than he had in months. There were bags under my eyes, lines on my forehead I hadn't noticed before, but there was also something new. Focus. Maybe even resolve. Around noon, Jaden showed up. I heard the truck first, the sputter of that engine he refused to replace, and then the screen door creaked open. He stepped inside without knocking, holding a six-pack and a bag of chips like it was a damn cookout. You alive? He asked. Barely. He looked at me, nodded once, then set the beer down. Fridge still sucks. We didn't talk about Delia. We didn't talk about anything, really. Just sat on the porch like we used to when we were kids, watching the trees sway and making up names for the birds we couldn't identify. But in that silence, something healed a little. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or what I was even going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to the house that didn't notice I was gone. Not until I remembered who I was. I pulled back into our driveway 4 days later. The tires crunched against gravel like they were protesting my return, and for a moment, I just sat there behind the wheel, staring at the front door. The porch light was still on, burned all night, every night like it always did, whether I was there or not. Nothing had changed. Same wreath Delia hung 2 Christmases ago. Same potted plants she never watered. Same front step with the hairline cracked she kept asking me to fix, even though she never said thank you when I did. I stepped inside, bracing for some reaction. Something. Anything. But Delia was in the kitchen, humming. She didn't jump when she heard the door. Didn't ask where I'd been. Just glanced over her shoulder, offered a smile like I'd returned from a quick jog, and turned back to whatever she was stirring. Hey, she said. Want dinner? I made cobbler. Like nothing had happened. Like we didn't just let 4 days pass without a word. Like I hadn't left wondering if we were even still married. I looked at her hands, how casually they moved, lifting the wooden spoon and scraping the bowl's sides. Like a woman at peace. Then I looked at her phone, face up beside the mixing bowl, and my chest pulled tight. Trent's name lit up the screen in a soft gray notification banner. I didn't say anything. Just walked upstairs, took a long shower, and lay on the bed with my eyes on the ceiling fan, letting it spin and spin as if it could pull the tension out of my body and fling it somewhere far away. That night, after she fell asleep with a smirk still clinging to her lips, I reached for her phone. It wasn't locked. It never had been. That used to mean trust. Now it just meant arrogance. I opened the message thread. There it was. Trent's name, bold and familiar. Dozens of messages, every few hours, it seemed. I scrolled. Old photos. Jokes. Flirty texts sent during work hours. One of them read, "Remember this spot?" Attached was a picture of our dog sitting on the bluff at Elkhorn Lake. Except Trent was in the background. That was supposed to be our place. I'd taken Delia there the first summer we met. I taught her how to skip stones on that water. Now she was sending that photo to her ex like it was a shared secret. Another picture, Delia in that dark green dress she wore to the family dinner, the night they all laughed at me. She'd taken a mirror selfie. Below it, Trent had typed, "You wore that for me, didn't you?" She responded with a winking emoji and the words, "Maybe, winky face." I felt sick. And then the kicker, "Made your favorite cobbler today. Miss you." She had made cobbler that night. And she offered it to me first, like I was the one she'd made it for. Like I was still the man who mattered in this house. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I closed the thread, placed the phone exactly where I found it, and lay there in the dark with her soft, rhythmic breathing beside me. I didn't touch her. Didn't shift the bed. Just stared at the ceiling, letting my anger rise in slow waves, controlled, measured, patient. Because now I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. Now I was studying a pattern. She'd laughed when Reese called me a token idiot. She'd toasted her ex. She hadn't called me when I disappeared for 4 days. And now she was stirring batter in the kitchen while texting another man about missing him, wearing a smile she didn't give to me anymore. I started noticing the little things. How she always kept her phone face down around me, except tonight. Maybe she got careless. Maybe she thought I wouldn't care anymore. Or worse, maybe she thought I was too stupid to understand what was happening. At breakfast the next morning, she acted like a sitcom wife. Scrambled eggs, toast with strawberry jam, and that same humming, like she'd swallowed a tune she didn't want to share. I thanked her. She smiled like she deserved a prize. She mentioned going to her sister's baby shower next weekend. Said she might stay the night. I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I was listening now. Watching. Because when someone lies to you, you can either react with rage, or you can sharpen the blade. The next 3 days, I played my role perfectly. I came home on time. I asked about her day. I fixed the dishwasher she claimed was leaking and let her pat me on the shoulder like I was a dog who'd fetched a bone. I even kissed her forehead once, and I swear I saw a guilt flash in her eyes for a second. But then she turned away and said, "Text Reese for me, will you? Tell him we'll see him Sunday." I waited until she left the room. I picked up her phone and scrolled through the threads again. There was no recent conversation with Reese. But there were plenty with Trent. One of them said, "Sunday's still good. Can't wait. Same condo." I memorized the address. I knew that street. Near the river. Close to where Reese used to rent before he moved out of state. Trent had a condo there now. Of course he did. That Sunday, she left in a floral sundress, lipstick on and earrings swinging like wind chimes. "Wish me luck," she said at the door. "For Reese's obnoxious stories or the baby shower games?" She laughed. "Both." Then she was gone. I didn't go inside. I grabbed my keys and followed. She took the same route she always did when she claimed she was going to see her brother, north toward the river, past the old tobacco plant, and through the industrial loop that bled into the nicer parts of town. I followed 2 cars behind, giving her enough space to breathe without ever losing sight of her brake lights. My palms sweated on the steering wheel, not from nerves exactly, but from the kind of cold clarity that sets in when you already know the truth and you're just waiting for proof. She turned down Riverview Lane, a street lined with condos pretending to be upscale, neatly manicured hedges, matching mailboxes, that fake suburban polish that never fooled me. She slowed at a rust-colored building with unit numbers printed on a brass plate by the door, Trent's condo. I pulled over half a block back, parked under a lopsided oak tree, and killed the engine. She sat in her car for a second, checked her reflection in the mirror, reapplied lip gloss. Then she got out, smoothed the back of her dress, and walked to the front door like she belonged there. She didn't even look over her shoulder. That's what struck me. No paranoia. No hesitation. Just the boldness of someone convinced she'd never be caught. Or worse, convinced I wouldn't care. I waited. 3 hours. I didn't even turn the radio on. Just sat there with the windows cracked and the sound of the river in the distance. I counted the people who walked by. A woman with a poodle. 2 kids on bikes. An older man with grocery bags. Not once did I see her come out. The sun dropped lower in the sky, the heat giving way to a cool breeze, and still I waited. Eventually, around dusk, the door opened. She stepped out, laughing. Not just a polite laugh, the kind that made her tilt her head and press a hand to her chest. The kind she used to give me. Trent walked her out. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He stood close. Too close. Touched her back. Said something low that made her laugh again. Then she got into her car and drove off like she was coming back from church. I gave it 5 minutes, then drove home. She was already there when I walked in, flipping through a stack of mail like she hadn't just stepped out of someone else's arms. "How was Reese?" I asked, standing in the doorway with my boots still on. She didn't flinch. Same as always, obnoxious. She smirked and tossed a utility bill on the counter. His new girlfriend's a nightmare. She lied without blinking. I wanted to ask what Trent's new cologne smelled like. I wanted to ask how many times she'd used my savings to pay for hotel rooms or gas money or take out for a man who once left her for a barmaid in Nashville. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't even angry anymore. Something colder had taken root. That's when it clicked for me. She thought I'd never notice. That I'd keep playing the family clown. The harmless, hard-working husband everyone could poke fun at over drinks while she played victim in private. They saw me as soft, predictable, too slow to act, too polite to challenge anything that made them uncomfortable. But they were wrong. I'd spent most of my life putting others first. Fixing leaky pipes, double-checking door locks, remembering birthdays that no one remembered back. I thought patience was a virtue. I thought loyalty would be rewarded. But all it had done was paint a target on my back and hand them the brush to color me as they pleased. I thought about Reese, about the smirk on his face when he made the toast, the way the others followed suit. I thought about the dinner table and how Delia didn't flinch when they humiliated. The next morning, I changed the locks. I told her the deadbolt had been sticking and replaced it while she was at work. She didn't ask questions. That was her first mistake. She'd gotten so used to my silence. She didn't recognize when it turned into strategy. I created a new folder on my laptop, labeled Receipts. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, messages, bank transfers. If I was going to be the clown in their circus, I might as well gather my popcorn and take notes before I burned the whole tent down. She asked me that night why I seemed distant. Just tired, I said. Long week. She nodded, kissed my cheek, said she appreciated how steady I was. I smiled back. The next time she left to see Reese, I let her. This time I didn't follow. I stayed home and logged into our joint account, downloading transaction histories. She was using the credit card we both had access to. Uber rides, boutique wine, air freshener, and room service. The receipts didn't lie. Even when she did, she came back late. Said Reese had made her watch a horror movie that gave her nightmares. I nodded. Sounds like him. She kissed my forehead again and went to shower. I looked at the hallway mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. Not because he was broken, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't confused. He wasn't wondering. He wasn't waiting for permission to feel betrayed. He knew, and he had a plan. It started with a knock on my office door, 3 slow taps. I looked up from the production log I was reviewing, and there stood Angelo, my supervisor, shoulders stiff, mouth tight. He wasn't the kind of man who made small talk when something was wrong. His background was military, structured, focused, no wasted words. So when he opened the door and said, "Miles, got a minute?" I knew it wasn't about inventory counts or the malfunctioning conveyor belt on line 3. I followed him down the hallway past the HR office and into a side room they usually reserved for team briefings. Except today, there was no whiteboard or safety poster pinned up. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a sealed manila folder waiting like a trap. Angelo gestured for me to sit. He stayed standing, leaning slightly against the wall, arms crossed. "I'll get to it quick," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "Someone filed a complaint." I blinked. What?" He reached for the folder, opened it, and slid a few printed pages across the table. "Says you've been erratic, disrespectful, aggressive. There's mention of inappropriate jokes, questionable decisions on write-ups. Says you've been unfit lately." My stomach dropped. "Who filed this?" He shook his head. "Anonymous. But HR had to bring it to me. Said they're looking into it." I scanned the documents. None of it made sense. The incidents were vague. Unprofessional tone, overuse of authority, unsubstantiated disciplinary actions. And then I saw something that made the blood drain from my face. One line referenced a comment I had made 2 weeks ago, at home, in the kitchen, joking with Delia about a coworker who kept falsifying clock-ins. I'd said, half laughing, "At this point I should just write the damn guy up for being born." That exact phrase was in the complaint. I stared at it like it might change. But there it was, word for word. A joke I made in my own home, during dinner, while she laughed and said I was being dramatic. That's when the trap fully closed around me. Only one person could have known that. I looked up at Angelo. "You know me. Do I seem unstable to you?" "No," he said flatly. "That's why I pulled you in before HR did. Something about this feels off." I left the meeting tight-lipped, holding that folder like it was radioactive. My fingers tingled. My brain wouldn't stop spinning. If Delia filed it, then this wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was a strategy. A calculated move to set a legal foundation. Make me look like the problem. Make her exit clean. I got back to my office, shut the door, and sat at my desk without turning on the monitor. I stared at the wood grain, every detail of the past few months flashing through my mind like a film reel. Her silence. Her laughter at that dinner. The text to Trent. The lies. And now this, HR complaints using language lifted straight from our private conversations. I opened our home computer that night while Delia was out picking up wine. She'd left her email open, didn't even bother logging out. I searched for keywords. Found drafts. Templates. Notes she typed to herself. Make it seem gradual, document Miles's attitude. Another draft read, if I'm going to file, it needs to seem like I've tried talking to him. There was even a timeline she'd mapped out. Meetings, purchases, dates she'd tell people she felt unsafe. It was all there. Like a war plan. She was building a case. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about love lost. This was a setup. Legal. Financial. Complete. She was laying the groundwork to walk away clean while burying me under a pile of HR allegations and marital complaints. If she could paint me unstable, take a few witness statements from her side of the family, and frame herself as the calm, rational partner, she could leave with the money. Maybe even the house. She knew me well enough to predict my moves. She counted on my silence. On my tendency to avoid confrontation. On the fact that I worked long hours and barely had time to breathe, let alone notice a carefully orchestrated character assassination unfolding around me. But she underestimated one thing. I pay attention. When the stakes are high enough, I stop blinking. I stop reacting. I listen. I calculate. And when I decide to respond, I don't raise my voice. I raise the ground they think they're standing on. I started collecting. Screenshots of messages. Withdrawals from our joint account. Copies of her notes. I backed up my work communications, including the positive performance reviews Angelo had given me. I installed a home surveillance system, not because I thought she'd do anything reckless, but because I needed records. Proof. She came home late again that week, tipsy, cheeks flushed from wine or attention or both. I sat at the kitchen table reading a work document when she dropped her purse on the counter and said, "Still sulking?" I looked up, just tired. She smiled without softness. "Maybe you need time off." I stared at her a moment longer than I should have. "Maybe I do." She went upstairs humming. I went back to my folder. It was a Wednesday night when I noticed the first withdrawal. Nothing dramatic, just $120 at a boutique I'd never heard of, listed under LC Home and Gifts. I stared at the bank statement on my phone while the TV played some documentary I wasn't watching. Delia was upstairs in the shower. I scrolled down. Another one, $1.85. Then $212. More small charges scattered over the past few weeks. One or two wouldn't have raised a flag. But the longer I scrolled, the more they started to add up. I logged into the joint account from my laptop. Sorted the activity by date. Then by vendor. Then by amount. When the math hit the four-figure mark, I pushed back from the table and stared at the screen like it might confess something. $9,780.22 had disappeared over the last 6 weeks, spread across wine purchases, boutique stores, digital payments, and one large transfer labeled only as personal reimbursement. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight, the kind of tight that doesn't come from panic, but from realization. I had built this account. Every overtime shift, every bonus I didn't spend. Every Christmas I skipped the new jacket to make sure her gifts stayed wrapped in silver foil. That money was the last thing I thought we had in common, something untouched, something we could still say we shared. Until now. When she came downstairs, towel around her hair and lotion on her legs, I asked, calmly, quietly, "Delia, have you made any big purchases lately?" She barely paused. "What?" "Just noticed some money moving out of the account. Boutique stores, cash transfers." She waved her hand like she was swatting at a fly. "Oh, that. Yeah, just paying down some debt. You know that old credit card from college?" I finally decided to clear it. I nodded slowly. "Almost 10 grand? Her tone sharpened. "Jesus, are you monitoring every dollar now? You've never cared before." "I didn't have to," I said. She scoffed. "God, you're acting like a jealous lunatic. Do you want receipts? You want to see every tampon and toaster I've ever bought?" I kept my voice level. "No. Just the debt." She grabbed her wine glass and stalked out of the room. "You've changed, Miles. and not in a good way. The front door slammed a minute later. No purse, no shoes. Just gone. Like she needed air, because being asked for basic transparency was now offensive. But I didn't follow. I didn't call. I just sat there and reopened the account history. I printed everything. Every line. Every receipt. I highlighted the biggest charges and stuck them in the folder I'd labeled for later. The lies weren't even the worst part. It was the confidence behind them, the assumption that I'd never ask, never look, never notice. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed while she tossed and turned beside me, muttering something about the AC being too cold. At 3:17 a.m., she finally stilled. I got up, walked down to the garage, and opened the locked drawer where I kept the backup phone we used during our road trips. No one else had the number. I charged it, installed a secure app, and began copying documents over. Quietly, methodically. The next day at work, I barely said 2 words to anyone. Not because I was angry, but because my mind had crossed into another place. A place where everything was measured. Where emotion had no room anymore. I was calculating now. I wasn't trying to fix the marriage. I wasn't even trying to understand it. I was gathering what I needed for the end. I checked her credit history when I got home. It wasn't hard. I'd done our taxes for 8 years. Knew her passwords, her logins, her last 4 digits. There was no credit card from college. No debt. Her credit was clean, pristine, practically glowing. The only recent activity was a soft pull for a condo lease, in both her name and someone else's. I stared at the screen until my hands went numb. The second name? Trent Morrison. They'd applied for a lease together. Last month. The same month she'd laughed when Reese called me a joke. The same month she'd stopped calling me babe and started using silence like a scalpel. I sat there in my office, the lights off, and stared at the glow of the screen. My ears rang. I felt like I'd swallowed gravel. I clicked open my screenshot app and saved everything. The lease inquiry, the timestamp, the broker's information. I opened her text messages that night after she fell asleep, curled up like a child in the bed we'd bought on a 36-month financing plan. There it was. Her last message to Trent. We're good to move in next month. He hasn't even noticed. Not if. Not maybe. Not let's wait and see. She was gone. In every way but physical. The body beside me wasn't mine. The smile she wore at dinner was meant for someone else. She had moved on with another man using my name, my money, and my trust like stolen tools to build a new home. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life. And they thought I hadn't noticed. But I had. And I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I was going to make sure she never forgot how it ended. The first thing the mechanic said when I walked back into the garage was, "You're not gonna like this, man." It was a simple oil change, nothing major. I brought in the truck on a Saturday because I figured the distraction would keep my head straight. The cabin still smelled like her, Delia's citrusy perfume lingering in the fabric no matter how many times I left the windows down. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. I just needed an hour of waiting room radio, stale coffee, and the kind of peace that came from men with grease under their nails talking about cars, not betrayal. "What's up?" I asked, leaning against the service counter. The guy scratched the back of his neck and nodded toward the bay. "Passenger seat. Found a bag. Figured I'd let you check it before we touched anything." I frowned. "A bag?" "Yeah, like a little makeup pouch. Kinda wedged under the seat." "Thought it might be yours." I followed him back, heart already picking up speed. My truck was mine. My one place. My shell. The only thing no one else really touched. Except her, apparently. He opened the passenger door and reached down. His hand came up with a small navy blue bag with a gold zipper, sleek, clean, not dusty like it had been there for long. He handed it to me, then backed off like he already knew he didn't want to know what was inside. I opened it. First thing I saw was a hotel keycard. Plastic. No branding. Just a tiny barcode and room number written in marker. 327. Next, a crumpled receipt from La Jolla and 2 entrees, 2 drinks, 1 dessert. Paid in cash. Then came the note. Folded twice, tucked into the side pocket. Tonight was magic. Let's never stop. T. That letter T hit me like a nail through the chest. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need handwriting analysis. My blood didn't need more proof. T was Trent. And this wasn't just emotional anymore. This was physical. Tangible. Real. She'd been in my truck. With his bag. Driving to that hotel. Lying about baby showers and brotherly visits while carrying around tokens of their nights together like souvenirs. I closed the pouch slowly, fingers steady. My insides were screaming, but my face didn't flinch. I nodded to the mechanic, thanked him, and walked back to the counter like it was just another Saturday. But everything had changed. When I got home, Delia was in the kitchen again, barefoot, wearing that same old hoodie she always pulled on after one of her girl nights. Her hair was down, lips glossed, and she smelled like a perfume I hadn't bought her in over 2 years, Joe Malone's Orange Blossom. A scent she claimed gave her headaches. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She was dancing slightly, humming to herself as she stirred a pot. Like life was beautiful. Like her lies hadn't unraveled and spilled into the cracks of my truck. She turned and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, babe, want to taste this? Where you coming from?" I asked. She blinked, then shrugged. "Reese's." He wanted help picking a birthday gift for Mom. She lied so easily it chilled me. I nodded and stepped forward, kissed her forehead. "Smells good," I said. She laughed. "Wait till you taste it." I used real garlic this time. I let her serve me. Let her talk. Let her think nothing had changed. And while she chattered about her brother's lack of style and her mother's obsession with planters, I nodded and listened. But behind my smile, I was cataloging everything. The inflections. The tells. The language she used when she was weaving new fiction. She never once mentioned the hotel. Never once admitted she'd been anywhere near La Jolla. She didn't know I had the bag. She didn't know I'd already scanned the receipt, photographed the keycard, and emailed the images to myself in case she lost them later. After dinner, she got a phone call. Trent, I assumed. She took it upstairs, said it was Lena from work. I gave her 15 minutes. Then I followed, slow and quiet, stopping at the bottom of the stairs to listen. She was whispering. "No, he didn't notice. I swear. I left it in the back. Yeah, probably rolled under. I'll check tomorrow." She paused, then laughed. "I know. I miss you too." I walked back to the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the family photo on the wall. Us at Myrtle Beach 2 years ago. Me in cargo shorts, her in that red bikini wrap, both smiling like we hadn't seen the cliff ahead. She came down 20 minutes later, plopped beside me, and sighed like it had been a long day. "Lena's losing it," she said, eyes on the TV. "Her boss is nuts." I wrapped an arm around her, let her rest her head on my chest. "Sounds rough?" I murmured. She nodded. "Thanks for understanding." I kissed the top of her head. "Always." But I wasn't understanding anything anymore. I was documenting. I was preparing. That night, while she slept with one hand sprawled across my side of the bed, I went to the garage again, pulled out the flash drive, labeled the next folder, passenger seat, uploaded the photo of the note, the receipts, the keycard image. Then I opened a new Word doc and began writing down everything: times, dates, dialogue. I even included her quote from the phone call. He didn't notice. I swear. She was right. Until now, I hadn't noticed. But now, I saw everything. And soon, so would she. Rochelle Granger's name had come up 3 times in the last 2 years. Once from a guy at work who said she handled his nasty divorce and left his ex with nothing but a futon and a microwave. Once in a local article titled, "10 Attorneys You'd Want on Your Side, Not Against You." And once, oddly enough, in a joke Delia made after a girl's brunch. "If I ever needed to clean house," she'd said, sipping her mimosa, "I'd call Rochelle." Everyone laughed. Except me. I'd remembered the name. Her office sat above a wine shop on Frankfurt Avenue, quaint, old brick with a wrought iron staircase and a green door that didn't advertise anything but a small plaque that read Granger Law. No receptionist. No logo. Just an old bell that chimed when I pushed the door open. Inside, it was colder than expected. Clean lines, gray walls, a single orchid on the windowsill. Rochelle herself was in the corner office, gray blazer, sharp jawline, glasses perched low on her nose, reading a document with the kind of focus that made you forget to breathe. She looked up when I knocked, like she already knew I'd come. "Miles Carter," she said, standing. Her handshake was firm. "You've got the eyes of a man who's done waiting." I didn't argue. Just sat down and opened the folder I'd brought. No small talk. No pleasantries. I pulled out the printouts, screenshots of Delia's texts, the photo of the bag, the receipts, the timeline. I slid everything across the desk, one piece at a time, laying out the narrative like an autopsy. "I need to end this," I said. "But I want it clean. And I wanted to cost them." She didn't blink. Just started reading. 10 minutes passed without a word. She examined everything like it was a case file, like the ink itself could testify. Then she looked up. You want to make this quiet or devastating? Both, I said. In that order. She nodded slowly. Infidelity, financial misconduct, possible cohabitation during the marriage, and digital documentation tying it together. That gives us leverage, significant leverage. And if you want to file on the grounds of marital fraud and depletion of shared assets, we can do that too. I also want a restraining order, I added. Not for her. For him. He's been harassing me through her indirectly. Showing up in my space. Riding in my truck. She scribbled something in her notes. Then we'll cite emotional distress and third-party interference. But we need to move quickly. Once she realizes what you've seen, she'll lawyer up. She won't see it coming, I said. Rochelle smiled. Then let's keep it that way. By the end of the hour, we had everything set in motion. Divorce papers filed under fault-based grounds. Financial forensics to trace the withdrawals. A motion to freeze our joint accounts until the settlement. A formal rebuttal to the HR complaint, drafted and ready to send to Angelo with evidence proving Delia's involvement. And the restraining order request, signed and sealed. I signed the paperwork with a pen that felt too light for what it meant. My hand didn't shake. Not once. When I walked out of that office, the sun was glaring off the windshield of my truck like a spotlight. I climbed in, started the engine, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The plan was in motion now. No more guessing. No more waiting for her to slip. I had the truth, the timeline, and the receipts. Delia still thought I was the man who had been before I broke. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. That night, I got home before her. I sat at the kitchen island sipping coffee, the documents still fresh in my mind. When she walked in smiling, cheeks flushed, I didn't look up right away. I just listened to her toss her keys in the bowl, kick off her shoes, and call out, "You're home early." Felt like cooking, I said. She wandered in, eyebrows raised. You? Cooking? Is it the apocalypse? I smiled. Something like that. She leaned over the pot, inhaling the steam. Smells good. Is that rosemary? I nodded, stirring slowly. You should sit. We've got things to go over. Her smile wavered, just slightly. What things? Budget stuff, I said casually. Taxes. Maybe a few receipts. She hesitated, then sat across from me, fingers drumming the counter. Okay. I placed a red flash drive on the table. She looked at it, then back at me. What's that? Everything, I said. Every lie. Every charge. Every message. It's backed up already, so you don't need to worry about deleting it. Her face paled. Miles, what is this? I met with Rochelle Granger today, I said, still stirring the pot. Divorce has been filed. Accounts frozen. HR complaint rebutted. Your boyfriend? He's flagged for interference. By the end of the week, the restraining order will be in his mailbox. Delia blinked, like the words hit her a few beats too late. You're not serious. Oh, I'm very serious. She reached for the flash drive. I slid it back. That's for the judge, I said. But I wanted you to see it first. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. This is insane. You're making a mistake. I turned off the stove. No. I made a mistake staying quiet for this long. She stared at me, breathing shallow, hands twitching like she didn't know where to place them. You're blowing up our life over, what, jealousy? No, I said. Over betrayal. Over manipulation. Over the fact that you used my truck, my money, and my silence to build a future with someone else. A man you swore was just a chapter you closed. Turns out, you were writing a sequel. Her voice dropped. I didn't think you'd ever fight back. I know, I said, stepping past her. That's what makes this so satisfying. I left her in the kitchen, her breath shallow, eyes glassy, staring at the life unraveling in her hands. She didn't chase me, didn't scream, just stood there like a statue in a burning room. The next morning, Rochelle sent the documents to her office, her email, and her parents. I changed the garage code, had her access removed from all joint accounts. My paycheck was rerouted. Every inch of my life secured, backed up, restructured. Delia was in shock. And Trent? Well, his name would show up in court before he ever set foot near my home again. The game had shifted, and I no longer played the fool. She didn't say a word the moment she stepped into the kitchen and saw it, the plain white envelope sitting right there on the marble counter next to the coffee maker. No name, no stamp, just one, sharp corner slightly curled as if it had been waiting all day to deliver the blow. I didn't greet her. I stayed leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, my eyes calm in a way that made her uneasy. She took one look at the envelope, then looked at me. Her hand hovered over it for a moment before she picked it up, lips pressing into a flat line. "What is this?" she asked, her voice too smooth, trying to sound unbothered. I didn't answer. She opened the flap and pulled out the papers inside. The divorce petition, the asset freeze confirmation, the notarized notice of our joint account audit, and a printed screenshot of her text message to Trent. Her expression cracked, just slightly, a twitch near the corner of her mouth. "You went through my phone?" I shrugged. "You left it unlocked." "I went through my life." She flipped through the papers in a panic, eyes darting over the legal language, the clipped, efficient language Rochelle had masterfully assembled. Financial misconduct, marital fraud, intentional deception, infidelity. Jesus, Miles. This is a little dramatic, don't you think? There it was again, dramatic. The same word she'd used when her brother humiliated me at that dinner. When I confronted her about the withdrawals. When I questioned the missing money, the overnight trips, the lies. But this time, the word didn't land like it used to. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I walked over to her, slowly, deliberately, and laid it gently on the counter next to the folder. She stared at it like it might explode. "That's the copy," I said. "Screenshots, photos, statements. Everything you've done. Everything you said I wouldn't notice." She opened her mouth, closed it again. I watched her chest rise and fall, her composure thinning by the second. "I was going to tell you," she said, but the sentence had no conviction. I nodded. "But you didn't." She finally looked up at me. Really looked. "You were so detached. You stopped showing up. You worked late. You didn't talk to me anymore. And you texted Trent while I grilled dinner on the porch. You met him in hotels while I paid our bills. You laughed with him the same night you toasted my failure." Her lips trembled, not from sadness, from realization. She had misjudged the moment, misread the man she thought she could keep in place. "This doesn't have to be ugly," she said. "Oh, but it already is," I replied. She took a shaky breath and dropped into the kitchen chair, the envelope still in her hands. "You blindsided me." I tilted my head. "You applied for a lease with another man. You used our savings to pay for hotel rooms and wine nights while I was scraping grease off my palms and working late to build a life I thought we were still sharing. It wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. But it did. Her silence folded around the room like a blanket full of pins. She looked smaller now, shoulders hunched, voice softer, like she was trying to shrink her way out of it. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I had already won the only fight that mattered, the one for clarity. She tried again. "You're throwing everything away. All these years." I shook my head. "You threw it away." I just finally caught it midair. She stood, suddenly full of breath, pacing the tile like a tiger testing its cage. "You don't understand how lonely I've been. You don't get what it's like being ignored in your own home." "Don't," I cut in, my voice quiet but sharp. "Don't spin this. You weren't lonely. You were bored. And you looked for a better deal. Except now, the man you dismissed is the man who's setting the terms." She went cold at that. I saw her face twist between shame and fury. "You're not going to get away with this," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. "With what? Holding you accountable? Showing a judge the paper trail you left wide open?" "I'll fight this," she said. "You think Rochelle scares me?" I smiled then. "Just a little." "No, I think the truth does." She stormed off, disappearing into the hallway. I heard drawers slam, then the creak of the closet door. The wheels of her old carry-on thudded against the hardwood floor like punctuation. She came back through the kitchen with a hoodie draped over her arm, a phone charger in her hand, and the expression of someone who just realized she lost control of the narrative. She paused at the door. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll think of something," I said. "You always do." She hesitated, then opened the door. As she stepped out, I added, "Your parents will see that flash drive tonight. So will HR. So will the judge." Her hand froze on the doorknob. Then she was gone. Just like that. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in what felt like years, the house felt still. No tension pressing against the walls. No background noise of secrets whispered behind bathroom doors. Just silence. Real silence. I walked back into the kitchen and poured myself a drink. Nothing special. Just the cheap whiskey I used to keep in the cabinet for cold nights and worse news. I sipped it slow and looked at the empty chair where she'd sat just minutes ago. The envelope still sat on the counter, but the weight of it was gone, It had done its job. That night, her brother Reese sent me a text. Didn't know it had gone that far. I stared at it. 3 seconds. 5. Then I locked my phone and set it face down. No reply. Because some things don't deserve one. Let them sit with their silence, just like I had to. Delia's lease with Trent? Voided within the week. Turns out when you submit a full legal complaint detailing financial fraud and misrepresentation during the lease application, brokers listen. Especially when you attach the paper trail. The screenshots. The withdrawals. The can't wait to move in together text. The leasing office called me directly, not because they had to, but because, in their words, we've never seen a situation so cleanly documented. They canceled the lease. The deposit, almost $4,000 from our drained joint account, was forfeit. I didn't smile when I read the confirmation email. I didn't pump my fist. I just folded the printout neatly and placed it in the final folder of my case. One more brick in the wall she thought she'd scale. Her parents tried calling twice the next day. First Arlene, then Ken. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to explain. They were at the dinner. They heard the toast. They watched me sit there in silence while they toasted Trent, their daughter's ex-boyfriend, the so-called one that got away. They saw their son-in-law, the man who paid for her dental plan, who fixed their sink on a Sunday, publicly humiliated. And they said nothing. Laughed, even. They chose their silence. Now they could live in it. But I wasn't done. I opened my email, attached the family photo someone took during that dinner, Reese's hand raised in a cheer, Delia mid-laugh, her dress the same one she later sent a mirror selfie of to Trent with the caption, "Did I wear this for you?" Maybe, winky face. I paired that photo with 3 other attachments. 1. Her text, "Miss you. Made your favorite cobbler tonight." 2. The screenshot from her application, co-lease with Trent Morrison, move-in date pending. 3. And the dinner receipt from La Jolla Inn, signed in her handwriting. Then I typed one line. "You toasted the wrong man. Send it to Delia's family group chat. Send it to HR. Send it to her boss." She didn't respond, but Reese did. "This is low, Miles." I left that one on read. 2 days later, HR formally dropped the complaint against me. I was called into Angelo's office again. Same folder on the table, but this time, he looked different. Not stiff. Not nervous. Just quiet. Measured. "Why didn't you tell me it came from your wife?" I leaned back in the chair. Would it have mattered? He paused. Not to me. But it would have changed how they handled it. He pushed the folder aside. "We've cleared your record. Formal apology from corporates in the works. You're solid, Miles. You've got more grit than most men I know." That landed differently. Not because I needed the praise, but because it came from someone who'd seen me beyond the jokes. Beyond the dinner table mockery. Angelo had watched me come in early, leave late, cover for sick coworkers, and handle equipment breakdowns on weekends. He saw the man, not the puppet everyone else tried to make of me. I stood, shook his hand. "Appreciate that." He smiled, then added, "There's a promotion coming up. Regional Ops Lead. You should apply." Thought I'd already been made the joke of the last one, I said dryly. He didn't laugh. Then it's time they stopped laughing. I applied the next morning. Got the call 3 weeks later. Promoted. Again. No dinner this time. No family toast. Just a quiet morning, a new badge, and a corner office that smelled faintly of oil and coffee. I hung up my coat, sat at my new desk, and looked out the window at the plant floor. Not because I missed it, but because that's where I came from. Every bruise, every callus, every stupid joke, they all built the man sitting in that chair. Delia? She moved back into her childhood bedroom. The same one with the posters still tacked to the wall and the shelf full of old trophies she never earned but always bragged about. Trent didn't stick around. That's what her cousin Jasmine said, anyway. He bailed after the lease fell through. Claimed he wasn't ready for the drama. That word again. Drama. They called it drama. I called it documentation. Delia texted once. Just one line. "I didn't think you'd ever fight back." I stared at it for a long while. Thought about replying. Thought about typing out all the things I wanted to say during those months she dismissed me. During the dinner where she laughed at me. During the night she came home smelling like another man's cologne. But I didn't send anything. I just blocked her number. Because the joke ended the moment I stopped laughing. 2 months later, I pulled up to the Briarwood parking lot in a car I never thought I'd own, black Ford Explorer, paid in full. Leather seats. Backup cam. Something reliable. Something mine. As I stepped out, Someone from the plant floor waved. New guy, Dante. Young, eager, probably still had grease under his nails. Hey, Mr. Carter. Call me Miles, I said. He jogged over. Heard you're the reason Reese Hawthorne won't show his face at company events anymore. I smiled. Is that so? He laughed. Word travels. I patted his shoulder. Don't believe everything you hear. But yeah, maybe believe that one. I climbed the stairs to my new office. The hallway smelled like fresh paint. The nameplate on the door gleamed in the light. Miles Carter, Regional Operations Lead. I opened the door, walked in, and took a deep breath. This was mine. All of it. Not because it was handed to me, but because I earned it. Through silence. Through grit. Through knowing when to let people talk, and when to let them watch you rise. That afternoon, Rochelle called. Just got the final confirmation, she said. Divorce is finalized. Settlement's locked. She walked away with exactly what you wanted her to. Nothing? Less than nothing, she said. Her name's removed from the house. Car. Accounts. The court ruled in your favor on every point. Judge even made a comment about your comprehensive preparation. You might have missed your calling. I chuckled. Nah, this one was personal. Well, Rochelle said, her voice laced with satisfaction, you took your pain and turned it into precision. I don't see that often. Thanks, Rochelle. She paused. You ever need anything else, you call me. Hell, I'd hire you. I hung up and stared out my window. Across the parking lot, I saw Delia, standing next to her dad's car, arms folded. I scanning the building like she wasn't sure if she wanted to come in or keep walking. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She looked different now. Not the woman who glided through rooms with smug confidence. Not the woman who made jokes with her family at my expense. She looked like someone waiting for permission that wasn't coming. I watched her stand there for 2 more minutes. Then she turned and got into the car. Drove away. She never came back. That evening, I stopped at the liquor store by the old railroad tracks. Picked out a bottle I'd only ever seen other people afford. A celebration, not for the divorce, but for surviving it with my dignity intact. When I got home, I opened the bottle and poured 2 fingers worth into a glass. I sat on the back porch, the one I'd rebuilt after the summer storm 2 years ago. The one Delia said was a waste of a weekend. It didn't feel wasted now. The sky was that soft orange pink you only see in Kentucky before a storm or a turning point. I leaned back, glass in hand, and breathed in the quiet. My quiet. No text buzz. No games. No lies. Just me. A man they laughed at. A man they underestimated. A man who doesn't beg anymore. I didn't toast the moment. Didn't need to. Because the real toast was in the silence. The joke was over. And I was no one's punchline anymore.